and it's going to be challenging with some of the news that's going out. And I guess we should talk about it. A lot of folks are leaving AEW. A lot of AEW originals. We've mentioned before. Keith Mitchell no longer there. He was a day one guy. Kevin Sullivan no longer there. He was a day one guy. More recently, QT Marshall no longer there. Day one guy. Dana Massey, who is Matt Jackson's wife, she was sort of running merch. No longer there. She was day one. But perhaps the thing that I have sort of tiptoed around because he's my real life friend. I was shocked to hear that Raphael Morphy is leaving. That news is out there now. I didn't feel like it was cool to talk about until it was out there, but he's got a new gig. He's going to be starting in January, and I'm thrilled for him personally and his family and what that means for them. It's really a dream scenario for him. High fives all around at the Morphy household this holiday. But man, it makes me scratch my head and say, who the shit can you just plug in there? I mean, respectfully, there's not a lot of people in the wrestling space who have experience here. I don't mean to diminish, but there are other camera guys. There are other people you can put in a truck. There are certainly a lot of other wrestlers, but a guy who's booking buildings and has those relationships and understands how to do it and when to do it and where to do it. And I know that there's a lot of people, and I thought this was maybe not fair, but I saw a lot of people when I saw the news come out, Eric, saying, oh, good, because that's been a problem with AEW. As if AEW is not selling tickets because they booked the wrong building. What? That's not real. I'm not saying it's not an important part of the equation, but I saw lots of criticism for the diminishing ticket sales and people sort of pointing their finger at Raphael Morphy. And I'm like, guys, they didn't buy a ticket because they didn't want to see it. He can't affect that. Like, yes, it matters where you are and how it's routed and all that, but that's from a cost standpoint. From a forward facing, I don't give a damn if the concert's down the mountain or across the county. If I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it. I think this Raphael Morphy departure is a big deal because it feels like you've got to look outside of the wrestling business. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I am thinking this is a much bigger story than maybe some people realize. What say you?
I agree on all fronts. You didn't say one thing there that I would have to take exception to. I think to your point about, the internet reaction of, applauding the departure of Raphael because he was the problem. I think that's a pretty typical example of the collective intelligence of the internet wrestling audience. I don't mean native intelligence in terms of being able to do other things outside of wrestling, but those who don't know anything about the business of the wrestling business would make a comment like that, right? If you've never done it, if you've never been even tangentially related to a promotion or promoter, whether it's rock and roll or wrestling or escapade or escapades, it doesn't fucking matter. It's the same business, just different entertainment, different content. But the problem is not with who's ever booking. Raphael is one of the best.
Yeah,
absolutely one of the best. And you listed the attributes there with someone, that would take for someone to step into that role. Relationships are at the top of that list. Absolutely. Relationships with the right management, not necessarily the top management, but the right management, the people that can get things done. Maybe they're not even VPs, they're directors, but they get the job done, and they can get it done because whoever their boss is has a ton of confidence in them. Those relationships can make or break that business or lack thereof when it comes to relationships. That's going to be really, really tough. And even if you find somebody from outside of the wrestling business who has those relationships, now the challenge is you've got to teach them how to sell your product.
Right.
That's that's a double whammy. So it's going to be really tough. I don't know what the impact is going to be, but I think overall, if you look at the list of people that have left, as positively as I can say this, it's one of two things. It's either management, i.e. Tony Khan, and whoever he listens to or manages with, looking at what they're doing and going, you know what, this isn't working. We need to make wholesale changes. Or it's a lot of really quality people, talented people who have been trying, who are just throwing in the towel. They're done. They realize that they can't make things any better. So depending on which scenario it is, and I don't think there's, I don't think there's a middle ground. I think it's one or the other. If Tony is making decisions, and yes, on the surface, maybe they look a little aggressive, maybe they may not look like the greatest decisions, but if he's made the decision, we need a reset, we need to approach our business differently. And in order to do that, I need some fresh bodies in those chairs. Okay. Give him credit. It's a risk, but it's a move. But if it's the other way, and you just got people going, can't do it, tired, boom, going to go on to something else, that's a big problem. And I don't know which it is.
Well, I don't know for sure which one it is either. I mean, I've had conversations with a couple of those, so it's probably not hard for people to figure out who I'm friends with over there and all that. But I know that change is inevitable. Jeff Jarrett talks about that on his podcast all the time. And I think if you take a look back and you look at all the decisions and all the departures and all the moving and going through WWE over the years, I don't necessarily think that a lot of this is cause for concern. I think some of this is contracts were up at the end of the year. And I think another part is, there's got to be, I think you're onto something. There has to be a sense of frustration, and there has to be some change. And I think change from the top down is a good thing. Again, I'm not saying this is what's happening, but I'm saying you're at least familiar, Eric, when there's a head coaching change. When a new head coach comes in, what's he like to do? He likes to bring in his people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you might be seeing some of that here, and that's okay. We know that there's been some really nice additions. We talked about Keith Mitchell leaving. Well, you and I both think the world of Mike Mansouri, and he's there. And so I have complete faith and confidence in what he's doing and what he's working on. And I do think that anytime something is a startup, and that's what this was. It's no longer a startup, but that's the way it started. Everybody just has to sort of find their footing and find a new normal. And then they create their culture and their environment, and it winds up being a better fit, because when something doesn't exist and it only exists in our minds, we all probably have in our mind's eye what we expect that to be. And then we actually do it and we see what the reality is, and that might not line up. So I view a lot of this in that way, where, the way AEW, people thought of AEW before it launched, and then what AEW is now, are probably two totally different things for everyone involved. So the Dana Masseys and the Kevin Sullivans and the QT Marshalls and the Raphael Morphys, that was a different AEW that they signed up for. And it really existed only in their mind. Now that they've done it, they've got the benefit of knowing what's real and what's not and making a decision. And I'm looking forward to what's next for AEW. I don't think they're on death's door. I know a lot of people are thinking that this is, perhaps the beginning of the end of AEW. I don't believe that. I think Tony Khan's in it for the long haul. It's now we just find out over the next 12 or 18 months at what level. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if I do or not. I mean, I think Tony's in it for the long haul, but I think there's a good chance that long haul is going to be really, really long, hard, and for the most part obscure. He's going to be fighting from underneath for a long time. And I say this here, let me make it simple. If in fact they lose WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, if they're no longer part of that platform, I'm not sure where they're going to go. It's going to be a smaller cable outlet. I don't see a big cable outlet. And in this whole thing with Paramount and WBD, I mean, that's such a wild card. I can't even begin to imagine what the kind of variables that's going to throw into the equation. It could be really good for AEW. Maybe if that, whatever that is, the Paramount WBD thing, if it actually becomes a reality, because it's too soon to know if it's real or not. But if it becomes a reality and there's a merger there, it could either be the absolute stake through the heart of AEW, or it could be the golden ticket. We don't know. But in a case where it's not the golden ticket and AEW finds itself on the outside looking in, and WWE is now the television partner for Paramount WBD or whatever that ends up looking like, I don't know where Tony's going to go, because the world is getting so small. Vertical integration. You're looking at probably 2 or 3 companies that own everything. Where are you going to go? What cable outlet are you going to go to that isn't owned by NBC, Universal, Paramount? Where are you going? And what do you have to sell? Not much. Here's what you get to sell. Hey, we were on Turner, for 5 years and prime time. And over the last 5 years, our audience has deteriorated. But we want to be on your network. Yeah. That's not I don't want to sell that. I wouldn't want to be the person who decided to try to sell that story.